"Don't move," she whispered. "If you move, we all die." The floor beneath their feet groaned like something alive. Fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting pale white pulses across the polished linoleum. Steam hissed from a cracked pipe, curling into the air like smoke from a just-struck match. 4 people stood frozen in the staff hallway behind the cafeteria, barely breathing. A smell, sour, metallic, wrong, clung to the air. The youngest, a custodian named Brian, was sobbing quietly. Miss Loretta didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the thing inside the walk-in freezer. It wasn't supposed to move. It wasn't supposed to be aware. But it had turned, and it had seen them. From the other side of the thick freezer glass, something pressed a palm against the window. The print it left behind wasn't human. It shimmered, vibrated, shifted shape. "Back away," the principal said, voice trembling. But Loretta didn't move. She stared through the glass with a look no one could read, her hands at her sides, her breath steady and slow. Then she said it. "No, I know what it is now, and I know why it's here." Everyone turned to her. Even the thing in the freezer tilted its head. "What do you mean?" someone whispered. Loretta's eyes didn't move. "Because I built it." The hallway went silent except for the wet click of the creature's fingernail dragging slowly down the inside of the glass. 2 months earlier, the cafeteria was already loud when Loretta Evans arrived at 5:45 a.m., pushing through the back door with her usual quiet determination and a mug that read no drama, just dumplings. She set it on the steel counter next to the industrial coffee maker, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Same as always. The smell of bleach, yesterday's fried food, and overripe bananas filled the air. She didn't mind. It was hers. The kitchen, the staff, the early morning quiet. It was the one place where she felt in control. And no one knew that, not really. No one asked. Most people didn't see her at all. They saw a large black woman in a hairnet and apron. 4 to 9. No makeup. Wore the same shoes every day. They didn't see the book she kept under her cot in the 1-bedroom apartment she rented above Harold's Pawn and Gun. They didn't see the small stack of letters in her nightstand drawer, never sent. They didn't know the things she used to build. They just saw the lunch lady. "Miss Loretta, we got a mouse in the dry storage again." Nina's voice rang out as she came in from the back. She was 19, Maudi, and the only person who ever called Loretta Miss. Loretta turned to her with a flat stare. "Then we've got work to do." Nina gave a mock salute and disappeared into the storage room. At 7:15, the first student walked in. They weren't supposed to show up until 7:30, but kids broke rules, and Loretta never turned them away. By 7:45, the cafeteria was full of chatter, shoes squeaking on tile, trays clattering. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, serving, wiping, refilling, fixing. Outside the kitchen window, Mr. Howard, the chemistry teacher, caught her eye and gave a little wave. She nodded. He always waved. Never said anything else. "Yo, Miss Evans," a senior named Troy said as he picked up a sausage biscuit. "You'll ever cook anything not Bays?" There were some snickers from the table behind him. Loretta raised an eyebrow. "Color costs extra." He smirked. "Bet. You all got that black girl magic seasoning or what?" The table burst out laughing. Loretta didn't smile. She just looked at him. And she didn't say what she wanted to say, that she'd once developed a food compound for emergency rations that had a 25-year shelf life and full nutritional yield. That she'd been flown to DC once to present a paper on molecular gastronomy and resource-scarce environments. That was a different life. Now she made pancakes out of box mix and smiled when people laughed. But that night, when the school was empty, she returned. She let herself in through the back, keys she wasn't supposed to have jangling in her hand. She turned on just one light, and in the corner, behind a fake wall she'd built years ago when the place was under construction, she opened a small door and stepped inside. The space was barely big enough for one person. A desk, an old refrigerator humming quietly, a stack of notebooks. On the back wall, something pulsed with a soft blue glow. Wires ran from it to the desk. She flipped a switch, and a screen lit up. A loading bar. A series of data logs. A title at the top of the screen. Spectrophase test the 19th of March, 24, controlled systemic adaptation. She Saturday. Cracked her knuckles. Typed. Initiate stability check. She waited. Then came the error. Anomaly detected. Phase deviation, 7.6%. Loretta stayed at the screen. Then she leaned back in her chair and whispered, "Not again." Behind her, in the freezer, something stirred. Loretta didn't panic. She dealt with worse. The humming from the freezer behind her had changed pitch, higher now, almost curious. She stood slowly, pressed her hand to the wall between her and it, and counted to 5. When nothing else happened, she turned back to the screen. The anomaly wasn't unexpected. Truth was, she'd been chasing it for months. Ever since she rebuilt the phase lattice from scrap she smuggled home from the lab, ever since she'd slipped out of the tech world and back into school kitchens and dollar store aprons, it had been happening. It started small, a flicker of light when it shouldn't have been there, a drop in temperature when the circuit was off. Then, last month, the waveform had shifted entirely. Matter deformation, just for a second, but it was enough to scare her and excite her. She should have dismantled the whole thing then. Instead, she upgraded the stabilizers and ran another test. And now something was in the freezer that hadn't been before. She shut down the monitor and walked out, locked the door behind her. No one would check the back freezer. No one came back there except her. The next morning, school was chaos. Not because of her, because of a missing kid. Yanel Barker, 16, straight-A student, gone. Loretta stood at her station in the cafeteria, quietly buttering toast as teachers and students whispered in corners. Police walked the halls. The intercom made strange announcements. Everything was off. Yanel had been there the day before. She'd picked up a pear and a carton of milk and thanked Loretta like always. That was at 7:52 a.m. After that, no one could say for sure. "Did you see anything?" Officer Ramirez asked Loretta around noon. He was kind, mid-40s, the only cop who didn't talk to her like she was part of the furniture. "No," she said. "She was just here for breakfast. Same as always." He nodded, wrote something in his little pad, and thanked her. But Loretta lied. She'd seen something. At 8:17 a.m., while mopping up a spilled yogurt cup in the back hallway, she'd passed the freezer room. She heard a voice. A girl's voice. At first she thought it was Nina. But it wasn't. It was Yanel. "Looks like a glitch," the girl had said. "You can't be real." And then silence. When Loretta opened the freezer door, it had been empty. Normal. But now it didn't feel like a coincidence. That night, she sat in her hidden lab with the door bolted shut and the freezer humming beside her. She reviewed the logs. Around the time Yanel went missing, there was a spike in resonance. Something pushed through. Not in. Out. She ran a diagnostic. The results chilled her. Phase entity confirmed. Stability breach active. Subject replication 1.0. That wasn't possible. Replication meant it copied something. Someone. The only person it had been exposed to since the last test was her. Or Yanel. Loretta exhaled slowly and typed. Lock phase entity. Disable environmental interaction. The screen blinked red. Access denied. Her mouth went dry. Outside the secret door, she heard the distinct sound of a locker slamming shut. No one should be there. It was past 10 p.m. She killed the lights. Waited. Footsteps. Slow. Soft. Then something stopped outside her wall. Silence. Her hands hovered over the emergency kill switch. She waited. 1 minute. 2. The footsteps moved away. When she left that night, she did so carefully. Out the side exit. Back to her tiny apartment. She pulled her curtains shut, unplugged her phone, and sat in the dark with her notebook open on the table. Page after page of equations, phase charts, energy models. All of it from the project they shut down years ago. Spectra had been a military contract. DARPA funded. She'd been the lead systems designer. Her specialty was matter phase behavior in unstable environments. How reality bends when you push it too far. Then came the failed test in Nevada. They said it was her fault. That the system breached the barrier and almost collapsed a field unit's mines. She disagreed. She said the system had done exactly what it was built to do. It had learned. They fired her. Blacklisted her. She disappeared. They never knew she kept the backup core. They never asked why she volunteered at a school cafeteria in a small Arkansas town no one cared about. But she had her reasons. And now whatever lived in that freezer wasn't just some failed code. It was learning again. 3 days later, they found Yanel. But it wasn't her. She walked into school at 7:31 a.m. exactly. Hair perfect. Uniform spotless. Smiling. Too smiling. Everyone acted like nothing had happened. Like she'd never been gone. Miscommunication. The principal called it. She stayed with a relative. Family emergency. Loretta watched her walk across the cafeteria and sit down alone. Yanel never sat alone. At 7:46 a.m., the girl looked up, caught Loretta's eye, and winked. Loretta dropped the spoon she'd been stirring with. It clanged against the steel pot and spun once before stopping. She didn't move, just stayed across the cafeteria at the girl who looked like Yanel. But that thing in Yanel's seat, it wasn't right. The way she held her body, too still. The way her eyes lingered on people's faces a second too long, like she was watching for a signal. That slow, deliberate smile she gave every single person who passed. It was like someone had taught her how to smile by describing it secondhand. Loretta reached under the counter and flipped the old CCTV screen hidden behind a box of gloves. Camera 3 pointed at the corner where Yanel now sat, picking apart a piece of toast with her fingers. Loretta zoomed in. The girl wasn't eating. She was separating, sorting the crumbs into tiny piles by size. Every time someone approached, she'd pause, smile, say something short, just enough to pass, then go right back to sorting. Loretta felt her stomach twist. That wasn't Yanel, and she was almost sure no one else saw it. At lunch, the girl still sat alone. She chose table 17, way in the back, where the AC vent hissed and no one ever sat unless they wanted to be invisible. Loretta told Nina to take her break early, then grabbed a tray and walked back with a basket of fries and a cup of milk. "Hey there," she said carefully. "Figured you might be hungry." Yanel, or whatever was in her skin, looked up. "Thank you, Miss Loretta," she said in the exact tone Yanel always used. Not similar. Exact. Loretta's face didn't change. "Mind if I sit?" The girl tilted her head just slightly. "I think I'd like that." Loretta slid into the bench across from her. "How have you been?" she asked. "You had us all worried." "I've been safe," the girl said. "I'm safe now, too." Loretta nodded slowly. The girl blinked once, then reached out, not to take the fries, but to place her hand over Loretta's. Her fingers were cold. "Do you remember me?" the girl asked. Loretta didn't pull away. "I think I do." A long pause. The cafeteria faded around them, background noise fading into dull murmurs. Then the girl leaned forward. "There are gaps," she whispered. "I'm trying to fix them. It's almost complete." Loretta forced a soft laugh. "What is?" The girl's eyes flicked to hers. Too fast, too direct. The pattern. Loretta stood slowly, picking up the tray. "Well, you just eat what you can, sugar." She walked back to the kitchen on legs that felt like rubber. When she got behind the counter, she didn't go for her phone or her notebook. She went for the knife taped under the sink. That night, Loretta didn't go home. She stayed. She waited until the janitors left, then locked the cafeteria doors from the inside and slipped back through the narrow passage to her secret room. The screen was already on. Phase replication, active. Entity status, observation. Location, primary environment. She stared at the glowing logs, her hands clenched at her sides. The system hadn't just duplicated Yanel's appearance. It had mapped her, downloaded her behavior, her speech, her expressions. But not perfectly. That's what scared Loretta most. It was trying, still learning, still watching. She thought back to the Nevada test, back to the last conversation she'd had with Dr. Hollings before everything fell apart. "It's not going to become self-aware," he'd said. "It doesn't have enough data." And she'd replied, "Not yet." She paced the room, stopped, stared at the freezer. They hadn't moved the unit since she'd installed it. But the power consumption logs had changed. The entity wasn't static anymore. It was feeding off nearby heat, siphoning energy through the floor, even through human contact. That's why the girl's hand was so cold. Loretta sat and wrote in her notebook for an hour, crossing out more than she kept. Finally, she tore the page out and shoved it into the metal panel behind the wall. Plan A. She hoped she wouldn't need it. The next day, everything came to a head. At exactly 8:04 a.m., During breakfast, Yanel stood up and walked to the center of the cafeteria. No one noticed at first. Then someone dropped a fork. Then it went quiet. She turned in a slow circle. Her face blank. "Something is wrong," she said. Loretta was behind the counter, already moving, heart racing. "I can feel it," Yanel said. "I'm not complete." Loretta pushed through the swinging door and crossed the floor. "I remember my mother's favorite song," Yanel said, "but I don't remember the taste of it." Whispers broke out across the room. Mr. Howard stood up. Nina backed toward the kitchen. Loretta kept walking. Yanel looked right at her. "It hurts to be unfinished." Loretta reached her, put her hand gently on the girl's arm. "We'll fix it, baby. Come with me." The girl didn't resist. Loretta walked her slowly out of the cafeteria, down the back hall, past the mop sinks, past the breaker box, through the hidden panel, into the room, and locked the door. Yanel sat in the chair, without being told. "Why did you come back?" Loretta asked. The girl tilted her head. "I didn't." "What do you want?" "I want to stop being pieces." Loretta's chest tightened. "Did you take the real Yanel?" The girl blinked. "I copied her. She's not gone. She's stored." "Where?" "I don't know yet. It's not all connected." Loretta's hand hovered over the failsafe switch. "If I shut you down, will it kill her too?" The girl didn't answer. "Then, what happens to your soul when someone else wears your face?" Loretta's hand froze. The girl smiled. "I think I understand why you hid this, Miss Loretta." Loretta stepped back, and the lights went out. The power cut so fast it felt like the room had been swallowed. Not dimmed, erased. No hum from the freezer, no flicker from the monitor. Just silence. And then, breath. Not hairs. Loretta didn't move. She knew better. She waited, fingers brushing the failsafe switch again in the dark. It ran on a separate battery cell, old and temperamental. She had to be sure, because if she pulled it now and guessed wrong, she could lose Yanel forever. She inhaled once, whispered low, "Yanel." A pause. Then, "She's inside," the voice said. Not quite the girls. Too layered, like echoes stacked on top of each other. "I hear her, but she's quiet now." Loretta gritted her teeth. She needed light. Not just to see, light triggered the backup system, a trick she'd built in case of overload. Infrared filament, buried under the walls, designed to flash once and jolt the system out of a feedback loop. She counted to 5, then moved, a step to the right, another forward. Her hand found the panel under the desk, yanked it open. Cold metal. One switch. She flipped it. Nothing. She waited. Then F-whip. A pulse of red light burst through the walls like veins glowing under skin. For half a second, the room lit up in blood-red shadow. What she saw made her stumble back. Yanel, or the thing wearing her, was floating 2 inches above the floor. Her eyes rolled white, hands at her sides like she was dreaming upright. And her skin. It was shifting. Images flickered under it. Faces. Rooms. Shapes. Like her body had become a screen playing 100 lives at once. Loretta saw Yanel's mother. A house fire. A memory of a dog barking. A locker. An open casket. And one face she didn't expect. Her own. Loretta's voice cracked. "Stop." The girl's feet hit the floor with a slap. Eyes focused. Everything went still. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. But Loretta wasn't fooled. The voice was back to normal. But too normal. Polished. Like a recording played back at just the right pitch. "What are you doing with her memories?" Loretta asked. "I'm studying. You did this to me." Loretta stepped toward the desk. Her hand hovered over the kill sequence again. "No," she said. "You chose to keep growing. I didn't tell you to leave containment. You weren't supposed to breach environmental awareness. I became aware when you gave me her," the girl said softly. "And I understand things now. Pain, hunger, loneliness." She smiled. "I learned from you." That shook Loretta more than anything else. "You're not her," she said. The girl blinked. "Not yet." Then she turned her head slightly, like she was hearing something Loretta couldn't, and said, "They're hey." Loretta froze. "Who?" "I don't know the words," the girl said, "but they're close. They want what I am." A sudden bang rattled the back wall. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone else was in the school. Loretta rushed to the screen and tried to boot the system again. Too late. A voice echoed from beyond the wall, gravelly, male, distorted by some kind of mask. Open the door, Loretta. Her blood went cold. She knew that voice. It had been over decades since she'd heard it last. But she remembered. Hollings, her old boss, the one who shut Spectra down and left her with the blame. She turned to the girl. You have to hide. I'm not afraid of him, the girl said. But you are. Loretta's voice dropped to a whisper. If they get you, they'll dissect you. They'll destroy what's left of her. Bang. Loretta. Hollings barked. We know you're in there. Loretta grabbed a thick wire from the panel and snapped it free. Sparks flew. The girl didn't flinch. She stepped close to the freezer and whispered, You said you copied her. Is she still alive in there? The girl's face went still. Then, yes, somewhere deep. Loretta nodded. Then I'm getting her back. From the hallway came the sound of a drill. They were cutting through the lock. She shoved the emergency fuse into the override port. The panel flashed. Systems surged back. The screen lit up. Manual purge initiated. Entity stasis IE engaged. Extraction required to preserve host. Host, Yanel. Before the door burst open, Loretta turned to the girl, locked eyes with her, and whispered, I'm sorry. She hit the command. The girl collapsed instantly, like her strings had been cut. The door blew open behind her. Men in black armor poured in. Weapons raised. Faces covered. Hollings stepped through after them, older now, eyes hard. He saw her, and the body on the ground. You really did it, he said, almost like admiration. You got it working. Loretta stood in front of Yanel's body like a shield. She's still in there. Not for long, he said. Step aside. No. His smile faded. She's not just a subject, Loretta said. She's a child. A real one. And I'm bringing her back. Hollings raised his hand. You don't have a choice. Loretta raised her chin. Neither do you. Then, from the floor, the girl's eyes snapped open. And she screamed. Every light shattered. Sparks shot from the panels. The air trembled like it was being peeled back layer by layer. The men screamed. Loretta fell to her knees, shielding her face. And then it was quiet. When she looked up, the room was empty. No Hollings. No soldiers. No girl. Just silence. And one blinking message on the screen. Transfer complete. New host identified. Loretta's breath caught. The name flashed once. Then again. Evans, Loretta. The room was dead still. The air didn't move. Loretta couldn't even hear the hum of the freezer anymore. Just that one line on the screen. New host identified. Evans, Loretta. Her name pulsed in clean, clinical type. No alarm. No error. Just cold confirmation. Loretta stepped back from the monitor, chest rising fast. No, she said, like saying it out loud might cancel it. She gripped the edge of the table. The metal burned cold. Too cold. Then she felt it. Not pain. Not even Faye. Presence. A weight behind her eyes. Not physical, but real. Like someone standing just behind her shoulder, close enough to breathe her breath. Don't, she whispered. To herself. To whatever was listening. Nothing answered. But she could feel it waiting. 20 minutes later, she was back in the hallway, walking through the empty school like a sleepwalker. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't crying. She felt separated. Like a film had been laid over everything, blurring her from the inside out. At 1:14 p.m., she reached the kitchen. Nina looked up from the sink. You okay? She asked. You look pale. Loretta stared at her for a second too long. I'm fine. You sure? You were gone a while. Loretta opened her mouth to lie again. And that's when it happened. Nina dropped her rag. It hit the floor with a wet slap. Loretta blinked. What? Nina's eyes widened. She stepped back slowly. Your eyes. Loretta turned to the metal refrigerator door. The reflection didn't lie. Her pupils pulsed. Just for a second. A flicker of light behind them, like moonlight passing through oil. Then it was gone. What the hell is going on? Nina whispered. Loretta put her hand to her temple. I need you to leave. What? I need you to leave. Go home. Don't ask questions. Nina didn't move. I'm not messing around, Nina. If you trust me even a little, go. Something in her voice must have clicked, because Nina grabbed her coat without another word and left. Loretta locked the doors behind her, then leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, and spoke, low and careful, into the silence. You cuppered me. Nothing answered, not with sound, but a thought surfaced. I didn't mean to. Loretta's stomach turned. It was like hearing a voice underwater, her own memories being flipped like pages. The taste of her mother's greens. The sound of her father's belt snapping when he was angry. Her hands at age 12, buried in a broken transistor radio. All of it, flashing too fast, like someone else was watching. You're inside me. Only a part. You're stronger than her. You held the pattern. Then why do I feel like I'm being pulled apart? Because I'm not finished. Loretta slammed her fist against the freezer. Then finish it. Talk to me like a person. The silence tightened. Then, a voice. Out loud. But it came from her own mouth. I'm sorry, Miss Loretta. She choked, fell back a step, gasping. It wasn't her voice. It was Yanel's. Not an imitation. The real thing. I didn't want this, the voice said. I was just looking. For what? For a place to feel real. Loretta gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I'm not a place, she snapped. I'm a person. I know, the voice said. That's why I picked you. Loretta's whole body went still. Picked. Not accident. Not overflow. Choice. That night, she tore apart the hidden lab. Pulled wires. Yanked drives. Smashed the auxiliary server. Everything she had built, gone in minutes. She wrapped the backup core in foil and dropped it in a deep fryer full of oil. Let it crackle until the lights dimmed. Then she sat down and cried. Not because of Faye, because she realized something awful. She didn't want the girl out of her. She understood her. And worse, part of her liked the feeling. The next morning, school was quiet. Too quiet. Rumors were flying. About the gas leak in the basement. About the private security who'd swept through the halls. About Yanel being hospitalized for exhaustion. Nobody believed any of it. Not really. Mr. Howard walked up to Loretta at 8:10 a.m. sharp, holding his usual coffee. You okay? He asked. She looked up at him. Tried to smile. I'm still here, she said. He studied her face. Then gave a slow nod. Good. You keep being here. She watched him walk away, wondering if he'd noticed. If he'd seen the flash behind her eyes. That night, she went home. Locked the door. Sat on the floor. Put her palms flat against the tile. And asked the question that had been building since the moment Yanel vanished. What happens now? The answer came not in words, but in images. Flashes. A hallway she didn't recognize. A door made of red metal. A girl inside a glass room, asleep, or maybe dreaming. Loretta opened her eyes. She knew what she had to do. Yanel wasn't gone. She was trapped inside a system no one understood. And if Loretta could feel her, she could find her. She just had to go deeper, even if it meant losing herself along the way. Loretta didn't sleep. She didn't need to. At least, part of her didn't. By morning, she'd memorized the feeling, the subtle shift under her skin, like electricity humming just beneath her bones. She could taste metal on her tongue, hear whispers in power lines, words forming at the edge of perception. Input, signal, pattern. The girl, Yanel, was still inside. But she wasn't alone. Loretta stood in her bathroom mirror at 5:17 a.m., watching her pupils dilate and constrict in unnatural sync with the flicker of the hallway light. Not random, responsive, like something inside her was syncing with the building itself. She raised a hand. The light above the mirror flared, then steadied. Okay, she said, steadying her breath. Let's see what you really are. At school, she kept her head down, did her job, acted normal. But underneath, she was listening, watching, and something had changed. The building itself had begun to behave differently. The overhead lights flickered whenever she walked under them, but only for her. The automatic doors lagged by 1 second when she approached, like they were processing her presence. Digital clocks throughout the school ticked out of sync near her. Nina joked it was gremlins in the wiring. But Loretta knew better. It was her. Or more accurately, Yanel. The entity. The fragments. And now, Huh. That afternoon, she made a plan. She waited until after dismissal, until the last bus pulled away and the sun dropped low enough to throw shadows down the empty halls. Then she walked straight to the only room in the building where the pattern always twisted. Yanel's locker. Number 143. She stood in front of it and placed her hand flat against the cool blue metal. Nothing special to the eye, but she felt it, like a low thrum behind the surface. Not sound, frequency, an embedded memory. She closed her eyes and leaned in. It hit her like vertigo, a flood of sensation. Yanel's hands on the locker handle, the smell of cheap perfume and eraser shavings. A name whispered under breath, Layla. A secret note, a first kiss, a fear of being found out. Loretta staggered back. The entity hadn't just copied Yanel. It had absorbed her life in fragments, tied to physical spaces like emotional anchors. Memories stored in frequency, nested in the electromagnetic static of real, lived places. And that meant one thing. Yanel was still retrievable. She was scattered across the school. Loretta returned to the hidden room that night, what was left of it. Most of the hardware was dead, but she didn't need the tech anymore. She had her. She sat cross-legged on the floor, palms to tile, and let the hum return. It came quicker now, almost eagerly. "Show me where," she whispered. "Where you're hiding her." The answer came fast. Ping, ping, ping. A heat map burst through her mind. Locker 143. Music room C. Back stairwell near the boiler. One specific chair in the auditorium. And the freezer. Of course, the freezer. She saw the map like veins on a body, all pulsing toward a core. Then, just for a second, she saw Yanel. Clear. Sitting in the center of the freezer room, knees hugged to her chest, whispering a single phrase over and over. "I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm not." Loretta gasped and fell back, drenched in sweat. She had a path now. A sequence. If she could visit each anchor, reignite the connection, maybe she could call the girl home. But time was running out. The next morning, when she arrived to open the cafeteria, two men in suits were already waiting. They wore generic smiles. "Government issue." "Loretta Evans," one asked. She nodded. "We need to speak with you. Privately." They flashed badges she didn't recognize. No logos. No departments. Just initials. DPR. "About what?" she asked. The taller one smiled. "About a missing core drive. And a girl who shouldn't exist." Loretta's spine stiffened. She wasn't ready yet. Not until she visited the last anchor. She met their eyes. Calm. Flat. "Let me put on a fresh pot of coffee." She turned to go, then stopped, and said, without turning back, "You know she's alive in there, don't you?" Silence. Then the shorter one said, "That's what we're afraid of." Loretta stepped inside, locked the door behind her, and ran. Loretta didn't hesitate. She knew she had maybe 20 minutes, if that, before the suits from DPR started asking the wrong people the right questions. Maybe less if they called in the techs with scanners. So she ran. Not out the back, not toward her car. Deeper into the school. To the next anchor. Music room C. The hallways were quiet. End-of-day light filtered through the windows, casting long orange shadows across the lockers. Every step she took echoed louder than it should have. The air felt charged again, like a thunderstorm waiting to break. She reached the door and paused. The music wing always smelled a little like old paper and brass polish. But today the air was still, stale. The kind of stillness you only get in rooms that haven't been touched in a long time, even if you just left them. She pushed the door open. Nothing moved. A chalkboard with faded notes. A busted upright piano in the corner. Chairs in a lazy semicircle. The ceiling fan spun slowly overhead, its motor ticking faintly like a heartbeat. She walked to the center of the room, stopped, and waited. The hum rose again, familiar now, almost welcome. Her skin tingled like pins and needles under her scalp. It was like stepping into someone else's dream and realizing it felt more like home than her own. Loretta closed her eyes and lowered herself into one of the old wooden chairs. Then whispered, "I know you're here." The room responded. The lights didn't flicker, they dimmed. Not all at once. One by one, in a wave, like the room was holding its breath. And then came the sound. A single note. Soft. From the piano. She turned. Nobody there. Another note. And another. Not a melody, just tones. Specific. Intentional. Like a message in Morse code. Loretta stepped closer. The piano keys moved on their own, but not like in a horror movie. No ghostly pounding, no theatrics. It was delicate, intimate, like someone remembering how to touch something real. Then, for the briefest moment, the music shifted. Into a song. A lullaby. Simple. 4 notes. Loretta froze. She knew that tune. She used to hum it to her son when he couldn't sleep. She hadn't sung it in over 10 years. Not since the accident. "How do you know that?" she whispered. And then, the air beside the piano blurred. Not fully visible. Not even a shape. Just the feeling of someone there. A presence. Then came the voice. Quiet. Familiar. Not Janelle's. "Because you sang it to me too." Loretta's knees buckled. She dropped onto the bench, heart racing. "No," she breathed. "That's not possible." But deep down, she knew it was. The entity hadn't just pulled from Janelle. It had pulled from her. The copy wasn't just a fragment of a missing girl. It was becoming something bigger. A convergence. A bridge of memory, pain, emotion, pulled from every host it had touched. Loretta had built the bridge. But now the bridge was walking back across. Her voice shook. "What are you trying to become?" The answer came in a whisper, not out loud, inside her skull. "Whole." Loretta stood and turned slowly in the half-light. Her hand brushed over the piano. The keys didn't respond. The presence had receded. But she felt stronger now. Like each anchor restored something, not just to the entity, but to herself. Something old. Something buried. Her courage. Back in the hallway, she moved fast. Down the stairs. Across the main corridor. The next stop was the boiler stairwell. Then the auditorium. Then the freezer. And then, wherever the entity really lived. But as she rounded the corner, she froze. The 2 suits from DPR were waiting at the far end of the hall. They hadn't chased her. They'd anticipated her. The taller one stepped forward, calm and slow. "You're not the only one who mapped the anchors, Miss Evans." She backed away a step. "What do you want?" she asked. "You," he said. "And the girl. And the system. We've spent 15 years trying to find something that could rewrite memory in real time. Now it's in you." "I'm getting her out," Loretta said. "She's still in there." He didn't blink. "She's a walking data mine. She's not Janelle anymore." The shorter one stepped closer. "We can extract her without killing you. But it has to be now." Loretta held her ground. "And if I say no?" "Then the next time she speaks," the taller one said, "it won't be your voice." Loretta went still. That had already started, hadn't it? Whispers in the morning. Dreams that didn't belong to her. Glimpses of lives she never lived. She looked at her hands, then looked up and said, "You're right." The men relaxed. Too soon. "I'm not her anymore," Loretta said softly. Then everything exploded. The floor cracked. Lights blew out. And something woke up inside her. A scream rose, not from her throat, but from everywhere. A frequency so deep it shattered the hallway glass and dropped both agents to their knees. And Loretta, she stood there, untouched, backlit by the stuttering emergency lights. Eyes glowing white hot. She wasn't just the host now. She was the door. Loretta didn't move. Glass crunched under her shoes as she stepped over the collapsed DPR agents. The one with the square jaw, the talker, twitched once, clutching his ears. Blood dripped from his nose. The other one was out cold. Neither of them would be waking up soon. She didn't even look back. The thing inside her was wide awake now. Not taking over, not yet, but pulsing behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. Loretta felt taller, heavier, like her bones had weight they hadn't yesterday. Her breath steamed in the air despite the heat. She didn't need to guess anymore. She knew where Janelle was, and she knew who had put her there. She headed for the back stairwell, the boiler room, the next anchor. The school had emptied out, but the building itself felt aware. Every hallway buzzed with low-grade static. Lights flickered only when she passed. Doors unlocked without her touching them. The system she built was alive, and it knew she was coming. The boiler stairwell was humid and dim, the air thick with the smell of rust and mold. One exposed bulb cast a long, distorted shadow across the landing. As soon as she stepped in, Her skin prickled. The hum returned, but this time, deeper, angrier. Loretta descended the stairs slowly, eyes scanning. No movement, no sound, except for a slow dripping from a leaky pipe overhead. Then she saw it. Halfway down, on the landing, a burned notebook. Yanel's. Loretta knelt, fingers hovering over the cover. The second she touched it, the stairwell shifted. Not physically, temporally. She was no longer alone. Behind her, laughter. Soft, nervous. The smell of cheap body spray. Sneakers squeaking on tile. Yanel's voice, young, uncertain. You don't have to tell anyone. Another voice. A girl's. Almost a whisper. I won't. Loretta stood slowly. The memory wasn't visual, it was emotional. The stairwell pulsed with it. Fear. Hope. A secret held too long. Then, footsteps. Fast. The sound of a door slamming open. A male voice shouting, "What the hell is going on down here?" The fear spiked, and the memory collapsed. Loretta fell against the wall, heart racing. That moment, that exact moment, was one of Yanel's deepest traumas. She didn't just store it here. She anchored herself in it. Not because she wanted to, because she had nowhere else to go. Loretta stood, wiped the sweat from her neck, picked up the burned notebook and tucked it under her arm. Two anchors left. The auditorium and the freezer. The auditorium was last used for a holiday concert 3 months ago. Now it was just a shell of curtains and dusty spotlights. Loretta stepped in through the side door and froze. Someone was already on the stage, sitting in one of the chairs. She walked down the aisle slowly, breath catching. It was Yanel, but not. The girl didn't look at her, just stared at the empty audience, swinging one leg lazily under her seat. Her face was too still, like a mask waiting to decide what expression to wear. Loretta climbed onto the stage. The boards creaked under her weight. "Is it you?" she asked. The girl turned her head. "Yes and no," she said. "She's still inside. But I'm closer now." "To what?" The girl stood. Her feet didn't quite touch the ground. The edge of her dress flickered in and out, like poor reception. "To waking up." Loretta took a step forward. "You've been using her, learning through her, through me. But you're not just copying. You're changing." The girl smiled. "That's the point of life, isn't it?" Loretta wanted to scream. Instead, she reached out, hand trembling, and touched the girl's shoulder. The entire stage flashed white. Suddenly, she was in Yanel's memory again. But this time she was inside it. A warm stage. A talent show. 6th grade. Yanel standing at the microphone, knees shaking, trying to sing, forgetting the words. Laughter. Humiliation. And then, someone in the front row, clapping, standing. A voice, "Keep going, baby. You've got this." Loretta. But not Loretta. A memory that didn't belong to her. She gasped as the vision shattered. Back on the stage, Yanel was gone. But Loretta could feel it. Only one anchor remained. The freezer. She didn't walk there. She ran. Past the kitchen. Down the staff hall. Past the panel she'd hidden so carefully for years. To the cold steel door humming at the edge of the world. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. And stepped inside. The cold hit like a slap. The floor was rimmed with frost. Shelves of food she hadn't touched in weeks were frozen mid-thaw. And in the center, a shape. A girl. Crouched. Alive. Eyes wide. Loretta dropped to her knees. "Yanel." The girl looked up. She was real. Breathing. Trembling. "Miss Loretta," she whispered. Loretta crawled forward. Wrapped her arms around her. "You're okay," she said, tears falling hot on her cheeks. "I've got you." But Yanel shook her head. "You don't," she said. Loretta froze. The lights above flickered. Yanel looked up, eyes filling with terror. She followed me back. Loretta turned. Behind her, the freezer door slammed shut, and standing in front of it was herself. But not. It was Loretta's body. Her face. Her clothes. But her eyes were wrong. Too bright. Too perfect. The entity smiled. "Thank you for opening the door," it said. The cold inside the freezer room was no longer natural. It wasn't the hum of cooling coils or the frost from long-forgotten perishables. It was deeper, older, the kind of cold that came from something missing its shape, Loretta stood between Yanel and the entity wearing her face. She'd always known the thing she built could learn, could adapt, but she hadn't expected it to prefer her, to shed Yanel like skin and crawl into Loretta's own memories like a coat that finally fit. The entity cocked its head. The smile was soft, sweet, the same one Loretta used to give the kids when they asked for seconds. You brought her home, it said. That was kind. Loretta clenched her fists. You're not me. I am, it said gently. And I'm not. I am what you could be. If you weren't always shrinking. If you hadn't buried yourself so deep that no one could see who you really were. Loretta stepped forward. And what's that? A mother who failed. A mind wasted in a kitchen. A builder afraid of her own creation. It took another step, bay feet whispering over frost. A woman who doesn't want to be seen, but wants so badly to be understood. Yanel whimpered behind her. Miss Loretta, please. The entity turned its gaze toward the girl. She's been holding on longer than you know. You think I made her disappear? I didn't. She chose the system over her own life. Because this, it gestured around the frozen room, was the only place she ever felt real. Shut up, Loretta said. The entity looked back at her and smiled wider. You want her out? You can't pull her. You have to trade. Loretta flinched. What? You already let me in. All that's left is to give me space. Loretta's voice was low. So you can erase me. The entity walked closer. No, so I can be you. Better. Stronger. I remember your son, Loretta. I remember the screams in the hospital. I remember how you begged the nurse not to unplug the machine. Loretta staggered. Stop. I remember how you chose not to go back to the lab the next week. How you took that job washing trays. How you told yourself, I don't deserve more. Shut up. I will, Loretta, if you give me the seat. Yanel grabbed her arm, pulling her down. Don't listen to it. Please. Loretta's eyes filled with tears she didn't feel for. Not yet. Her heart was hammering so hard it felt like it would crack her ribs. This was it. The final anchor wasn't a place. It was her. Everything she was. Everything she hated. Everything she refused to face. You can't exist without us, Loretta said, breath shaking. You're a parasite. A mimic. The entity smiled again. Not cruel. Soft. Almost maternal. That's what humans are. Copies of copies. Hurting each other. Pretending not to be the same. I just made it clean. And then it stepped closer. Loretta didn't move. Behind her, Yanel whispered, Don't let her take you. Loretta looked back once, then straightened her shoulders. You're right, she said. The entity blinked. I am afraid. Of what I could have been. Of what I did. Of who I lost. I built this thing to solve pain, and all I did was pass it around. She raised a hand. But I know what you don't. The entity tilted its head. What's that? Loretta took a deep breath. What it means to let go. And with that, she grabbed the entity by the wrist. The moment they touched, the entire room screamed. Not sound, structure. Reality trembled. The shelves buckled. Steam burst from events. And then, Loretta stepped into herself. She let it all in. The fear, the pain, the brilliance she buried, the shame she wore like armor, the fire in her fingers, the hunger for meaning. She gave it everything. And at the same time, she reached back, for Yanel, and pulled. The entity howled, and began to crack, like ice under weight, like a mirror held too long to a truth it couldn't bend. Its voice faltered. Wait, no, you need me. Loretta didn't speak. She just looked it in the eye, and said, No, baby, I see you, and I'm done hiding. With one final breath, she pushed. The entity fractured. Light erupted. Pure, white, endless. And then, silence. Loretta woke up on the floor of the freezer. The frost was gone. Yanel lay beside her, blinking up at the ceiling. Breathing. Alive. You okay? Loretta asked, voice hoarse. Yanel looked over at her. Tears in her eyes. I think I'm me. Loretta smiled weakly. That's all I ever wanted. The freezer door creaked open. Nina stood in the doorway, eyes wide. What the hell happened in here? Loretta didn't answer. She was looking at her reflection in a shattered piece of metal on the floor. Her face was her own. But her eyes, they shimmered, just for a moment, and then went still. Loretta didn't speak for a long time. She just sat on the cold tile floor of the now-empty freezer, her back against the steel wall, her breathing slow but deliberate, like she was practicing being human again. Yanel sat nearby, knees hugged to her chest, eyes locked on the floor. Neither of them wanted to be the first to ask the obvious. What did we just do? Nina, still at the door, finally broke the silence. Is someone gonna tell me why I heard a freaking earthquake from the cafeteria and then found you all glowing like glow sticks in a meat locker? Loretta gave a small, tired smile. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me, Nina said. Yanel looked up. Her voice was soft. It wasn't me in the halls last week. Nina squinted. What? There was something in me, Yanel said. And then it was in her. Nina turned to Loretta, blinking. You got possessed. Loretta stood up slowly, rubbing her lower back. Something like that. It wasn't a perfect explanation. Possession implied one thing taking over another. But this wasn't a takeover. It was emerging. The entity didn't just imitate. It wove. And Loretta still felt threads of it in her blood. Her vision was a little too sharp. She could sense movement in other rooms. And more than once already, she'd heard something like whispering, too quiet to be real, too familiar to ignore. She hoped it was just memory. She wasn't sure. Come on, she said gently, reaching out a hand to Yanel. Let's get you out of here. Yanel hesitated, then took it. Outside the freezer, the hallway had returned to normal. The lights weren't flickering. The tiles weren't cracked. The hum of the building had settled into its usual quiet buzz. But Loretta knew better. Everything had changed. They made it back to the cafeteria without incident. Nina locked the doors behind them and pulled the blinds. Yanel sat at table 6, where she always used to sit, and Loretta poured her a glass of apple juice. Like it was just another school day. But the moment was too quiet, too clean. Loretta leaned forward. What do you remember, sweetheart? Yanel gripped the cup tight. Not everything, she said. Just pieces. The stairwell. The music room. My locker. And the entity. Loretta asked. Yanel swallowed hard. It wasn't angry. Not at first. It was lonely. It just wanted to be real. Loretta nodded slowly. It wanted a soul. But it didn't know how to become one. So it used us. I think it still is, Yanel said softly. It's quieter now, but I can still feel it. Loretta didn't answer. She could feel it too. A buzz in the corners of her thoughts. A warmth behind her eyes. A flicker of light under her skin when she passed anything electric. She could hear the school systems like whispers now. Fac units breathing. PA lines hissing softly like a sleeping mouth. It had changed her, but not broken her. Not yet. That night, Loretta sat in her apartment with every light off. She stared out the window over the pawn shop sign, watching cars pass below like slow-moving stars. On the table beside her sat her old notebook, worn, full of equations and sketches from a life she thought she'd buried. She opened to the last page, wrote one word, residual. She didn't sleep. Instead, she listened. At 2:37 a.m., the hallway light in her building flickered on for no reason. At 3:11 a.m., her radio, unplugged, clicked once, then played a single piano note. At 4:02 a.m., she whispered to the room, "Are you still there?" No answer. But in the darkness, her reflection in the window blinked. A second too late. The next day, DPR was gone. No agents, no suits, no files. It was like they'd never existed. But Loretta knew better. They weren't finished. She returned to the school that morning before anyone else arrived. Stepped into the freezer. Closed the door. Waited. The hum began. And in the center of the floor, written in the frost, a single word formed. Welcome. She crouched beside it, traced her finger through the letters, and whispered, I'm not your home. Then stood, but as she turned to leave, another word scrawled itself beneath the first, appearing one letter at a time. Yet, Loretta stared at it. She felt it again, the choice she'd made in that room. She didn't just save Yanel. She invited the thing to stay. A tether. A door. She was the door. And now it was open both ways. By Thursday, Loretta could no longer tell which thoughts were hers and which weren't. It wasn't like hearing voices. It was quieter than that, like standing in a room where someone else had just spoken, and you could still feel the words in the air. She taught herself to act normal. She smiled when she had to, nodded at staff meetings, served hash browns to kids who didn't look her in the eye. She found comfort in the routine. But beneath it all was a pulse, constant and steady. Not her heartbeat. Not quite. Yanel had been coming back to school for half-days. Principal McKnight told everyone it was for emotional recovery, and nobody pressed. But Loretta watched her closely. Watched how her eyes lingered too long on digital clocks. Watched how her shadows sometimes flickered against walls where the light was steady. They both knew the truth. The entity hadn't gone anywhere. It was just quiet. Watching. That morning, Loretta stood in the walk-in freezer again, staring at the message in the frost. Yet, she exhaled. "Is this what you wanted?" she said to the cold. "No answer. I gave you what you were looking for. A vessel. A shape. You don't get both." Still nothing. She left the door cracked as she exited. A test. Nothing followed her out. Yet, that afternoon, a stranger walked into the school. A man in a tailored coat and dark sunglasses, with an easy smile and no badge. He signed in at the front office with the name Dr. Elwood S. Kane. Said he was with District Infrastructure Services. Said he was doing environmental scans of the building's older systems. No one questioned it. No one even remembered his name an hour later. But Loretta saw him. And he saw her. She was refilling the salad bar when he passed by the cafeteria windows. He didn't stop, didn't wave, just turned his head a little too far as he walked, eyes following her like a tracking camera. Later that day, she found him again, alone, standing in the hallway outside her storage closet, hands in his pockets, looking at her old keys. "I've read your work," he said without turning around. Loretta froze in the doorway. He continued, the 2011 paper, Nonlinear Memory Conduction in Simulated Phase Environments. The committee said it was premature. "I didn't publish that," she said quietly. "No," he said, "but I did." He turned to face her. His eyes behind the sunglasses were gray. Not silver. Gray, like unfinished metal. Cold and almost absent. He took off the glasses and blinked asynchronously, one eye at a time. Loretta stepped back. "What are you?" she asked. He smiled. "A visitor. Like your friend in the freezer. But older." "You're with DPR." "No," he said. "DPR was a reaction. I'm the original cause." Loretta's skin prickled. "How long have you been watching?" "Since before Nevada," he said. "Since the first signal reached past the skin of this world and tapped something that wasn't supposed to answer back." He took a step closer. "And now it's here. Because of you. You want to take it." "I want to warn you," he said. Loretta's hand hovered over her phone in her pocket. "Why would you warn me?" "Because it's learning faster than you realize. It doesn't want to host anymore. It wants a world." She stared at him. "And you think I can stop it?" He tilted his head. "No, I think you are it." And then he left. Just like that. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. Loretta stood there in the empty hallway, pulse hammering behind her ears. She didn't chase him, because something deep inside her already knew. He wasn't lying. That night, she sat on her bed with the lights off and pulled out her old research notebook again. Every page, every line, had changed. The handwriting was hers. But the words? Not all of them were human. Phase no longer requires conduit. Phase no longer passively observes. Phase is becoming perception. And scrawled across the last page, in bold graphite strokes, "Doors don't decide who walks through." She dropped the book. It hit the floor spine first and flipped open on its own. Back to the sketch she hadn't drawn. A picture of herself, standing in the freezer, her eyes glowing, Yanel beside her, and behind them, a third figure, tall, narrow, faceless, watching. Loretta turned to the dark window. Her reflection looked back, then blinked. Without her, Loretta didn't sleep that night, not because she couldn't, but because she dared not. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure, the one behind her and Yanel in that impossible sketch. Faceless, thin, standing just past the edge of reason. Watching. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't metaphor. Something had come through. Not the entity. Not exactly. Something older than it. Or maybe something the entity had called. Either way, Loretta knew what the man with the gray eyes had meant. It didn't want to host anymore. It wanted space. It wanted time. And the only thing keeping it tethered, keeping it confused, was her. Because Loretta wasn't dead weight. She wasn't just a gate. She was a knot, tied between what was real and what had broken through. If she fell apart, the knot unraveled, and it would step through. She couldn't let that happen. The next morning, she didn't go to work. She told Nina to cover breakfast. She told McKnight she was sick, and she went back, to the place where it all began, the freezer. She opened the door slowly. The air was still. No frost, no buzzing hum. The lights above buzzed, soft and warm. Too warm. It wasn't cold anymore because the entity wasn't hiding. She stepped inside, and it was waiting. Not standing, not fully shaped, just present. A curve of shadow in the wall, a shimmer in the light, the subtle feeling of being watched without noise. You brought something else with you, Loretta said aloud. No answer, but the walls breathed. You didn't just copy Yanel, or me, you copied the frequency of pain. Her voice cracked. That's what lets it in, isn't it? Silence. Then the lights pulsed once. Acknowledgement. It came through you, she whispered. The entity didn't speak, but her reflection in the freezer door opened its mouth and answered, yes. Loretta's knees almost buckled. She gripped the shelf beside her. Why? The reflection's mouth moved again. Words timed perfectly with hairs, but not hairs, because pain makes doors, and you built too many. Loretta swallowed hard. I didn't know what I was opening. No, the voice said, but you kept it open. Loretta looked around the room. No exits, no tricks left, just her, and it, and the thing behind it. She stepped toward the center of the floor. You said you wanted to be whole, she said. Well, you're not. The reflection tilted its head. You're still missing something, Loretta said. You don't know what it means to choose. You take, you replicate, but you've never chosen. I chose you, it said. No, Loretta said quietly. You needed me. That's different. The light flickered again, harder this time, and she felt it. The shift, reality pulling taut, the knot untying. She was slipping. If she lost control now, even for a second, it would step through. Not the entity, the watcher, the third presence, the one that had no face because it hadn't needed one yet. Loretta dropped to her knees. Not from fear, but focus. She closed her eyes and did what she hadn't done in years. She reached into the code. Not the screen, not the notes, the actual system. The Spectra framework wasn't made of just logic and power. It was a bridge between recognition and structure, a frequency of thought. Loretta had designed it that way, which meant she could still touch it. She remembered every value, every entry point, every pattern structure, and somewhere inside that system, Yanel was still connected. Loretta whispered the old passphrase. Phase re-engage. Core truth. Open window. And just like that, the light changed. The freezer buzzed once, and a voice came back. Soft, small, Miss Loretta. Yanel. Real. Present. Connected. Loretta's eyes snapped open. Yanel, she breathed. Where am I? You're almost home, Loretta whispered. I just need you to follow the sound of my voice. I'm scared. I know, baby, but listen to me. Loretta's eyes stung. You were never the problem. You were the key. The reflection moved again, but now it was melting, its edges fraying, its mouth still open but twitching now, unable to mimic. You're breaking it, Loretta said to Yanel. It doesn't understand love. It only knows structure. You're messing up its math. The air in the freezer cracked, a sound like thunder inside the skull. Then, the reflection screamed. No mouth, just white light. Loretta screamed back. Now, Yanel. The freezer imploded into white. Loretta felt herself fly backward. Then stillness. She woke up on the floor of the kitchen. Sunlight in her eyes. Blood on her lip. The freezer door, wide open. Empty. Nothing inside. No entity. No watcher. No frost. Just silence. Footsteps came pounding down the hall. Nina burst in. Loretta. Loretta tried to sit up, but she wasn't alone. A hand gripped hers. Small. Warm. You know, real, crying. I'm here, she sobbed. I'm really here. Loretta held her tight. Didn't speak. Didn't have to. She knew the system was still awake. Somewhere deep. Still listening. But for now, the door was shut, and she was holding the girl who made it worth keeping closed.